Hello and welcome to the last part of our series of data presentations. This one's going to be about data reporting. So after we've done our analysis and our visualization of that data, how do we combine all of those things and communicate our information to those who will be making the decisions? So how to integrate data graphics and descriptive language to create an effective data report used for decision making. So a QI data report should be crafted to reflect the analysis of the data and the process of collecting that data to ultimately convey, the quality of the care provided. So in this data report, we're going to be communicating all of these various steps. So know your audience. Reports are used to feed back information to people who will ultimately be using that data to make decisions that will impact the quality of care provided. So where are the data being used? At the clinic level, the district level, regional level, perhaps national level? Who is making the decisions? Administrators and leaders, nurses and physicians, donors, QI teams. What type of decisions are they making? Are they prioritizing quality improvement projects? Are they revising indicators? Are they setting policy and guidelines? Are they deciding where to allocate funding for specific resources? So really know your audience. Think about your audience when you're creating your data report. So here on the right are the various sections I think should be included in a QI data report. Those highlighted in bold are the ones I'm going to be focusing on in this presentation. And this chart over here is just kind of my interpretation of who I think probably reads each section of these data reports. So of these QI data reports. Those in very high leadership positions may not have time to go through the whole report, so it's important to have a clear and concise summary of that report in this section called the executive summary, as well as having very good conclusions and recommendations, because they may only read those two sections. Someone working at the clinic level may be interested in the results because they're going to be looking at that data to perhaps prioritize QI projects at their clinic. A research and evaluator may be very critical of the methodology of data collection and kind of the data limitations, so they may read the whole report very carefully. And a donor perhaps would also be very interested in the results and the conclusions and recommendations. So this is all theoretical, but I think it basically speaks to that depending on who you are, you may be interested in different sections of the data report. So it's important, I think, because of that, these are the 5 most important sections. There are the most overlap between all these various audience members. So just a question to think about, who do you share your QI national report with, and what sections of a data report do you read first? So I'm just going to go through each of these sections now. So the executive summary should be a 1 or 2 page summary with a short paragraph summarizing each of the following. So the background, so just providing more context of the quality improvement program, the purpose, the methodology, how were the data sampled, how were the data collected, etc. The results, so what were the main findings for perhaps a particular review period of data. Conclusions, what are the main take-home messages that the data are saying, and recommendations based on those results and the conclusions. So the methodology section should basically describe what I've boxed out here in red. How were the data abstracted from the charts? How were they sampled? How were they collected? And then how were they analyzed? And we can break down methodology into each of these various subcategories. So now I'm going to go through each of these one by one. So clinic selection. So which clinics are included in your quality program? Here's a really great example from Kenya that shows where the clinics are located using these green stars and the names of those clinics. So it may also be useful to kind of break down what types of clinics that are part of your group of clinics that are submitting data. So case list generation, sampling methodology, data abstraction. So it should describe this process in very in a lot of detail. How exactly did we go from our entire patient population at the clinic level to identify those who are eligible, perhaps by some active patient criteria. From that eligible patient population, how were charts selected and sampled? And from that sample, how was information abstracted? So data validation, data quality assurance, data management. So this section should really describe, what processes do you have in place to ensure that the data are valid and complete. And also, it can also be a section where you may highlight some clinics that did not adhere to sampling methodologies, so that when we're making interpretations of the data, we know that upfront. So indicators, you may decide to include them in your methodology section, or perhaps right in the results section, right next to the actual indicator results. But if you decide to include them in the methodology section, I think it's always nice to have your indicators in a nice table with the numerators and denominators specified. So this is just a example from our international data report, and this is the Mozambique Adult Clinical Visits Indicator. And I show how from round to round the eligible patient population has changed, and the indicator has also changed from round 1 to rounds 2 and 3. So that will allow us to make the best interpretations of the data when we're looking at perhaps this clinical visits indicator across 3 rounds. The data analysis and data limitations section. So this should describe the type of statistical analyses performed. Are we looking at mean clinic scores, population rates? Are we looking at medians, percentiles? What are we looking at? What are we reporting in the data report? It should describe how the data were aggregated. So did we aggregate by clinic type? Did we just aggregate by region? Or are we looking at kind of a benchmarking report? It should describe any non-adherence to sampling methodology. So you can also put it here, or you can put it in the earlier section on data validation or data quality assurance. But if there are limitations in the data that we should be aware of when we're making interpretations, they can also be included in this data limitations section. So the results section. So this should communicate the story of the data using charts, tables, and summary statements. So really we're going to utilize the charts that we created in the visualization step of the process and put those in here with tables and different summary statements, so that no matter who's reading it, if they prefer the words or if they prefer looking at the graphics, they have that option. So sample characteristics, you may choose to also include a table that compares your eligible patient population with your sample and for each clinic. So this is just to show how representative the sample was at each of these clinics to the actual eligible patient population that we're interested in. So there are different types of results that we can report, and that will perhaps depend on the type of QI report that you're sharing. So if we want to create a benchmarking report where we want to compare clinic scores with other clinics of similar types, perhaps we can do something like this shown on the right. So here we have clinical visits percentages, and the solid line going across these bar charts is the regional mean score, and the dotted line is the mean clinic score for all of the clinics regardless of the region. So this type of chart would really quickly let me benchmark a particular clinic with the mean of the region and the mean of all of the clinics. Perhaps we want to make group comparisons where clinics may be grouped together by region, type of clinic, or wave of implementation. So we aggregate all of the community health centers, for instance, and see how they're doing over time. So I think the best way to communicate results is trending, because if there are historical data, we should always include them, because that provides us with more information, with more context, so that we can make the best interpretations of the data. And it allows us to see certain patterns and trends for particular clinics or particular groups of clinics, so we can, make the best decisions. So just some quick formatting tips for the results section. I actually like providing indicator definitions with our charts and tables, not just in the methodology section, so the reader doesn't have to, flip back and forth through the report. We always want to be transparent with any data limitations, so include important caveats and footnotes directly in the results section if you think they will make an impact in how a reader would interpret the data. Remember, your formatting should reflect your analysis. So to quote something I said in the visualization module, how you create your charts and graphs should be content-driven, not methodology-driven. If you decide to include short summarizing statements about the data, just make sure they're carefully written and don't oversimplify the data. And you can also include, key points in boxes to highlight important aspects of the data. So here's a quote from Schuhart, who is actually the father of the PDSA cycle, and he said, "Data should always be presented in such a way that preserves the evidence in the data for all the predictions that might be made from these data." So how I interpret this is that, whatever information that we have about our data, we should include them so that those people that are interpreting our data have as much evidence and as much context as possible so that they can make the best decisions. So here are just a few charts and tables examples from our international data report. So in Haiti, the PMTCT ARV prophylaxis indicator, the eligibility for that indicator changed during the most recent round, the January through June 2011 review period. So I just put that here. Eligibility was changed from 28th to 14th week of pregnancy for the most recent round. So I like to include things like that that I think would impact the interpretation made about the data. Here is, I think this is from Uganda. This is their TB diagnostic evaluation indicator, and I've included the indicator definition right below the title. And I've also included some caveats about the data right underneath the table. So the conclusion and discussion section. So conclusion should be clear and concise, summarizing the main points of the data shown in the results section. But conclusions shouldn't be made based on supposition or speculation. And we should use, a nice balance of reporting positive and negative findings. Some possible topics for the discussion section are generalizability, how generalizable were our sample results to the larger eligible population that we're really interested in. What limitations, again, do we have about the data? This actually may be the most appropriate place to put this section instead of the methodology section. What next steps are there? So now that we have this data, what are the next steps in analyzing it or improving specific performance measures in the future? And what recommendations do we have? And these recommendations should be focused on steps to improve the process of performance measurement, not necessarily the indicator results, because I think readers of the report will make their own specific decisions on how to improve performance. So just some guiding principles for creating a data report. We want to be transparent. Honesty is important for rigorous interpretation of data. We want to highlight data limitations. We want to provide as much context as possible. We want to make note of any caveats of the data. We want to include contact information if people have questions about the data. Include the dates and perhaps even include the raw data in an appendix section. We want to make sure, again, that our report is content-driven. We don't want to prescribe to a specific way of presenting our results. And there are many, many ways of summarizing and displaying the data, and we want to let the data tell us how to do that. We want to keep it evidence-based, so any recommendations should be based on sound evidence, and we don't want to overgeneralize. So thank you again very much. If you have any questions, comments, and/or suggestions, please email me at awei711@gmail.com.